track rate's very, very overrated.
Hello and welcome back to Strike Rate, the cricket analytics podcast with me, Jack Hope, and Dan Weston. We've been talking, Dan, about what happens during an auction. We've been mainly focusing on auctions. We might as well lean into that. But if you've got some examples from drafts or you want to bring drafts in, please do. I think something that everyone would love to know is what are the discussions that take place either in your sort of 90-second slot when it's your draft pick, or when you're mid bid and there's a player up for sale in that auction.
I think in a draft, you're a lot of the time you're probably 95+% sure what you're going to do as the clock starts. So it's just reaffirming that that's the decision that you want to take. You know that you should be in a position where you know that if a certain player gets to you at that stage, then that's the one you want, because you've got the decision trees all in front of you, basically, in that situation. Especially in a mini draft where you're picking, like, say, 4 players, that's easily done. So it always blows my mind a little bit in drafts when you have, like, I don't know, 2 minutes to make a decision, and teams like go into the last 10 seconds. It's like, what have you been doing for the last month, basically? Or there's been actually times, I think, with a team in the 100 draft, and I'm pretty sure that there's been times where a team didn't realise it was their turn, which is pretty crazy. In an auction, look, I think sometimes it's probably fair to say there might be a little bit of theatre involved as well in the bidding process, and you might not just be talking about the valuation of a player.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I'm going to pose a scenario to you here, and I want to hear what your thought process would be. Basically in this scenario, let's say it's a draft, and you need to fill. You want one more spinner. Maybe there'll be a bench player. Maybe they'll play 1 or 2 of the matches at the right venue, but it's a defined role that you want to fill. What do you do if a better player that would usurp one of the 11 or one of the other 10 players in your team, or one of the 11 players in your team, is unexpectedly available, and you're pretty sure they're an above average player? Do you say, I'll sacrifice that role-based pick for the good player, or do you stick to your guns in that scenario and take the person who fits the role?
For me, I'm quite role-oriented generally. So there might be, for example, a necessity to pick a spinner who matches up against right-handers, and then suddenly, I don't know, there's not really many of them, but like a gun-off spinner comes along that you don't expect. But actually, it might completely unbalance your squad. So that's actually a really good example of the kind of name recognition and sort of reputational bias that can come into a team making a mistake at a pressurized moment, because they might be like, oh, wow, he's available. I didn't think about that. He's great. But actually, he's not a player you need at all, you know? He might be just completely surplus to your requirements. So I think, and it's interesting because, I get messaged a lot by agents offering me players and stuff all the time. And actually quite a commonplace occurrence for me to reply will be like something like, good player but doesn't fit in with what we need right now. And I think it's really important, because I'm not looking to accumulate 11 good players. I'm looking to accumulate a team that can work together to try and provide every on-pitch solution I think we need.
If it's a really extreme example of this, like, I don't know, you have Glenn Maxwell and you have Shimron Hetmeyer and you have Tim David, but Liam Livingston is unexpectedly available. But what you really need is the bang average left arm spinner. Like, Livingston might be a bad example. Livingston, who can't bowl, because he obviously could fill that role as well. Do you take just Livingston's batting here, and say, look, I think that it will unbalance us, but the value added is so high?
Yeah, and obviously you're just using hypothetical names here, but yeah, I wouldn't want to pick the player who is surplus to what we've already got.
Okay.
It's because I mean, there's no use sitting on the bench, is he? Because you've already got like all those other options, or you might have to completely tear up the entire balance of the squad that you've trying to create over the last 2 months, just because some player is unexpectedly available. I mean, that happens all the time in auctions, right? You know, there's players that you were like that went for big money, and we might not rest the paddle because we realised that actually they're not gonna be the right player for us at that point in time. Doesn't mean to say that you don't rate them. It just means to say that they're not right for you at that given moment. And again, I refer back to what we talked about earlier about how some teams bid like on an insane amount of players. And that's where maybe you can work out who is just bidding on who the player is rather than a coherent squad identity.
Yeah. Two really quick questions to finish off from me then, Dan. What's the biggest mistake you've ever seen a team make in an auction or draft you've been involved in?
I don't want to refer to individuals. We've done that a little bit already, actually. But like, okay, so here's a few things that they might do. One, make emotional decisions. Two, rely massively on recency bias. Three, buy players and skill sets that they don't need. I mean, there's a huge list. I can't even think about half of them. Not do due diligence on availability. I mean, there's so many I can't even think off the top of my head. But there's like a good, like, you know, this you see it in every single auction, basically.
Yeah. And final one, when the auction's finished,
Yeah,
what in your view does a successful auction look like?
one that you've stuck to the processes with.
Even if you didn't get the exact players that you wanted?
Yeah, absolutely. Because
Cool.
you can only do what you set out to do in advance and then adjust it as the event goes on. If the cards don't fall your way, sometimes you just have to accept that.
Great. Dan, we're going to wrap up there. Just a reminder to everyone listening and watching, make sure you click and subscribe and follow. If you want to ask a question in one of our future episodes, follow Dan and myself on Twitter. I'm at JackHope0 and Dan is at SA Advantage. And you should also listen to the Cricket Podcast, which is the sister podcast, the original 480 episodes of topical cricket discussion. Obviously in the middle of the India-England series at the moment. We're recording this a week in advance, so I don't know what's happened in the fourth test, but we are recording it just after England have been battered in the third test. So let's assume it's 3-1 and ask, can England do anything in the final test to salvage some pride? We'll be back after the break with your questions.